Hello, hello, hello. This is Gresh from the I Am CEO podcast, and I have a very special guest on the show today. I have Andrew Ryan. Andrew, excited to have you on the show.
Oh, I'm real excited to be here. Thanks, Gresh.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm super excited to jump into all the awesome things that you're doing. But of course, before we do that, I want to read a little bit more about Andrew so you can hear about some of those awesome things. And Andrew is the visionary founder and CEO of New Chip Technology. Andrew's journey is nothing short of remarkable, a seasoned engineer, Army veteran, and the force behind three successful startups. Graduating at the age of 15, he founded his first startup at 17 and boasts over 10 years of experience building international teams. His expertise spans 7+ years in public and private sector fundraising, corporate boards, working with regulators, and lobbying. As the founder and CEO of NewChip, Andrew is reshaping the global investment tech landscape with a fintech marketplace that leverages over a decade of experience in building global teams and fundraising across private and public sectors. His focus on utilizing machine learning to cut through noise and connecting users with tailored investment opportunities underscores his commitment to innovation in the technology space. And I truly appreciate your service, Ryan, Andrew, and all the awesome things that you're doing. First and foremost, things that you did there, of course, things that you've done after you've, gotten out of the service as well, too. But one of the things when I was preparing for this, I really loved about hearing about your background was the fact that I think you started something when you were 8 years old. You started mining gemstones, I was reading,
I
and
know,
that
so don't
you
explain
competed
it.
against your sister's business, if I was reading it right. But you went from that to selling energy drinks outside of middle school and all these awesome things that you're doing. So super excited to have you on the show. Are you ready to speak to the IFCO community?
Yeah, of course. I love to. So,
Oh, awesome. Well, let's rewind the clock a little bit, hear a little bit more on how you got started, what I call your CEO story.
so I come from a background, immigrant type family, poor. My dad had to run his own business. My mom was a waitress, right? And so, I saw the struggles they were always going through, and they couldn't always afford to give us, everything we wanted. They gave us what we needed, but not everything we wanted. And so we were always trying to find ways to, one, build a business on the side. Two, my father, he would just keep us up at night talking about business ideas and all the things he had and dreamed and wanted to do when he was young, but he couldn't. And he imparted that upon us of like what we could be, what we could do. I mean, it was so frustrating for a while. And then Shark Tank came out, and it was something we all watched together as a family. And so it just kind of built up to where, I always wanted to be my own boss, run my own business. And I know that sounds cliche, but being in the military and being told what to do 24 hours a day, it will really tell you where you want to be and how you want to work too, right? And so started a company back then. We were early. It's very popular now for everyone to have an Amazon store. But back then, you couldn't just get an Amazon store. You had to partner with Amazon. There was a whole program for it. I mean, it wasn't you just go click and do it. And we did very well. We were one of the earliest stores on Amazon, and we did six figures in our first, 45, 60 days. And so it was crazy. And so I saw that opportunity there. And as soon as I got out of the military, I was so focused to build something. And then so I started one company, and then sold that within like 6 months. It wasn't my dream to build that. It's just something I had to do. There was a girl who was tragically murdered at UT, and I'd been on the business advisory board. I've been all these positions of power where I'd fought for them for years to where I could actually do something to help the students. And the administrators didn't want to do anything. Even if we brought the money in, it was just like this weird fight. They didn't want to add cameras. They didn't want to add more security. It was this real big clash between the city and it was nuts. And I really saw the inadequacy of government. And so I said, okay, well, if I can't do this with that, I need to get to a position where I have enough money to where if I come in and I can just buy this for my university, right? Like someday I want to have enough money that if something like this ever happens again, I can say, you can't give me excuses. We're going to make this because I'm going to pay for it, right? And so I wanted to become that guy. And so I started another company, and then we ended up selling the new chip core software suite. It was an app. It was one of the top 100 in the App Store, and we kept the name though because the other company, King's Crowd, didn't need the name. They really liked our software, and we were growing and absorbing the whole basically ecosystem of the market, and nobody was competing with us. And so we said, okay, let's sell to them, and we kept the name, launched an international accelerator, built that through COVID, helped thousands of startups. And then, last year, a lot of craziness happened with the world, and SVB Bank collapsed. That caused a ton of startups to collapse. We ended up, shutting down that side of the business. And now I'm working on an AI company. By the time this airs live, we'll already be live. So I'll go ahead and talk about it. We're working right now, but many of my portfolio companies have had this experience of AI just coming through, and they're just getting pummeled by everybody. They have no idea what it is. They can't see through it, and they can't afford the Accentures and big time consultant shops that help them adjust their stacks and really adjust quickly enough, because AI is moving so fast, nobody can keep up with it. I mean, I'm doing this full time, and I have engineers, and they cannot keep up with how fast this is moving. It's just an
Mhm.
exponential rate of increase. And so we're doing everything we can right now, and this will have already launched by then, but basically helping. It started with helping our portfolio companies and my investments, and now expanding out to help many other companies just expand, grow, and utilize AI in their stacks to be competitive. Because all it takes is one company doing really well, and they can just kill a whole industry segment that can't keep up. And so I think that's kind of a monopolistic behavior, and we really want to help as many companies stay competitive, because if a couple monopolies happen, all that does is lead to overcharging, and then nobody can compete anymore. And then we're in a corporatocracy. So, anyways, hope that answered the question. I didn't drive into other questions, but that's kind of the nugget.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Well, you drove exactly where we needed to be, because to hear more about you and kind of makes you tick. And I say so many times, like it's great to know, of course, what people do and exactly how they execute. But I probably think it's even greater to know the why behind they do what they do. And I appreciate hearing like what kind of fuels you and what even happened at UT and how that kind of fueled a lot of the things that you end up doing later on.
Yeah, if you had to just put it into like a 10-second blurb, it really is. I saw my father was brilliant, but he couldn't execute. He didn't have access to resources. I've seen so many
Mhm.
communities of people and individuals throughout my entire life that could do amazing things if they had access to resources. And we're finally in a place now with AI, with the training and the right access. I mean, I had a friend the other day that said, I want to build this. And I literally built it for them in like an hour. I was like, okay, this is how you do it. Teach you how to fish. This is with AI, you can do this now. And it totally changed their whole perspective. I mean, it's really changing the game, and I want to get access to as many people as fast as possible so they can use it. I mean, I can't live without it. It's now my new phone. I can't. ChatGPT and Perplexity are like built into me. I mean, I run through them all day long. I was running analysis and algorithms and calculations just an hour ago, even
Yeah.
while I was doing other work. So it's really important that we teach people and give them access. I mean, it's like high school doesn't teach you how to do your taxes. I mean, we got to start teaching people how to use AI. Otherwise, the disparity between individuals is going to grow to this maximal state where, I mean, they won't be able to keep up anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is why, when I was reading, a lot of what you did, the word advocacy kind of came up, because I think so many times we don't think of entrepreneurship and business as a way to kind of advocate for those things. But as you said, like even hearing your dad and the stories that he would tell and the things that he wanted to accomplish, being able to kind of execute on how to kind of bridge that gap to make those things come to fruition, and how that ends up giving you, I don't know if power is the right word. It might be the right word, but I'm also thinking of opportunity. But if we don't know about those things, if you aren't empowered, or you don't have the awareness of it, then again, you don't have that opportunity to be able to, create that app or create that software, solve that problem, or whatever that those things might be.
Yeah, I think Citizen United kind of like set this precedent for everybody. Money is speech, right? And now there's so much speech in the world,
Mm,
to be heard, you have to have money. That's just it's set the precedent of Citizen. Like, I'm not a fan of Citizen United, but that's what it made the rule is that money is power and money is speech. Set the law forever now, right? And if that's the case, then to be able to speak, you need money, because otherwise you're going to be drowned out. We see so many things kind of hitting us in all angles, and thankfully, by the time this comes out, I'm not sure if you're following the Google and Yahoo changes coming next week. February 4th, they're getting rid of,
yeah.
or they're making all companies move to one click unsubscribes. They're really coming down on spam. I mean, they're doing some game changing stuff in the internet field to try to cut out the noise and some of the illegal activity. And so I think that this next year is going to be amazing of, how the world adjusts to the amount of friction and noise we deal with on a daily basis. I mean, I probably get 100 notifications, right? And most people have stopped answering their phones. They stopped answering text, right? And so we have to solve that, and get the right information to people. Not probably sound like Mark Zuckerberg, but
Yeah. There you go. No, but I think it's so important, because again, it's just a fire hose of information. Everybody's getting that information because there's so much access, especially to our phones and anything that we have that's connected to, honestly, to the internet. Seems like it's always going off, and it becomes like numbing to some degree when those things happen. So I wanted to drill down a little bit more into the technology you've been building and working on. Could you take us through a little bit more on what that is, how you're impacting and affecting the clients you work with?
Yeah, so in the past, I made it accessible for everyone to build a business, right, and to raise venture capital, and to a degree that had never been done before. I mean, thousands of people, and so now my goal is to focus on consumers and help consumers connect with technology in their hands, right, and really utilize, because I mean, you give the average person Chat GPT, it doesn't really explain what they're doing. You give them access to other tools that are built on any of the GPTs, right, or LLMs. I mean, that's just the baseline. It's not even talking to machine learning search or something like that, but like I think if we can empower the average person to start using it in their daily life in a way that really impacts and adds value to them, I think that the world will change a lot. I mean, how much time and how much effectivity and just productivity people will get will be different. And so, what we're doing is using technology. We might pivot by the time this is done, but this is my vision at least,
Mhm.
is that utilizing technology to help the consumer. I found how valuable it was to teach companies how to use AI, and I mean, increasing productivity overnight. And so, how do I do that on a scale that companies are charging hundreds of thousands of dollars? That how do I do it, make it affordable for everybody, and not just for businesses to scale their workforce, but the average consumer? And how do we bring that education to them? I got into fintech mostly because of education. I wanted to educate all the retail investors that they could now invest into equity in startups, and I helped bring over $100 million into that ecosystem, and just from our app. Right, that the ecosystem, I think it's just shy of $1 billion now since then. And so to have had that impact to educate people, because nobody was doing it at the time, there was a disparate network of things. And I don't want to say no one's doing it right now, but I mean, you're not seeing it everywhere, right? You're not. I honestly don't even know CEOs that are utilizing AI like well enough and effective enough, because it's moving so fast. I mean, the Chat GPT store just opened up and nobody's even knowing what it is, right? It's just, in 6 months from now, when everyone's adopted it, it'll be something new. And so just utilizing technology to educate consumers, connect them, and build uh, more time for them. Hopefully, it gives them more time with their families. All the things that we've missed in these last few years, I hope AI, instead of making it just more productive so that we work more, that it actually gives us more time for our families or anything else, and that we don't become so reliant on it that we're just putting out, junk. But I really think that it'll make our lives better. And at least for 80% of us. 20% of people, the hyper hustlers, well, they'll just keep selling more and they'll spend less time with their families. But, you can't solve it for everybody. So,
Yeah, that makes so much sense, and that's where those sometimes Google rules and all those things that are coming about come from. Those people that are going to continue to hustle and send things out and pitch those things. But I think it's so important. Like again, it goes back to that. I often say we want to get more attached to the why instead of the how. And the how, I think sometimes we can get so attached to because we want to know exactly how things are going to happen, how we're going to execute, how those things are going to how we're going to use the chat GPT store, whatever it is, that we don't go back to the why. And I think if we have that why as a filter, as the how start to evolve, because it's going to change 6 months, 3 months, changing rapidly, as you said. But if we know our why, then we know that the tools and ways that we do that will evolve, but the reason behind it won't. And I think that you having that mission, and how that is manifests itself in the things that you do, really reigns true. And it's like a really great reminder for all of us that are thinking about, innovating or making an impact or creating more space to have time with our family, whatever that is. I think if we know that why, then that allows us to kind of be that North Star for what we're doing.
exactly. I mean, start with why. Simon Sinek,
Yeah.
one of my
Yeah.
favorite books.
Yes, absolutely. So, what would you consider to be what I like to call your secret sauce? This could be for yourself, the business, or a combination of both. But what do you feel kind of sets you apart and makes you unique?
um, I don't know. It's probably my greatest weakness, but it's also my secret sauce. I really don't like making money. My last company lost millions of dollars consecutively. My investors kept, because I really and that's a symptom of some of the VC side. But I didn't. Anytime you work with consumers, it really is about bringing value to them, and doing it as much as you can first. And so my secret sauce really is that I'm not going into anything I build or do to try to get rich. I mean, I really think that if you help people and you add value to people, you will become wealthy at some point. I mean, same thing as Elon. He's become so wealthy by trying to bring value to the world. He hasn't changed his vision or his goals. He said, I'm going to make, like he started at the very beginning, I'm going to make a cheap electric car that get down the cost of cars to $30,000 to where anyone can buy one, right? And everything he's done has been, if you trace it back, goes to that single point, right? He sold cars at 100,000, 200,000, like all these different prices because he knew those markets would buy it. But his real goal has been to make it mainstream so where anyone could afford. And in fact, it just doesn't make sense to not buy one, right? And because
Mhm.
of that, he really started with the final goal in mind, and he really built back to that. That's something that I tend to do. I can't remember the name of the method. It's like a waterfall method, but it's not. It's a type of graphing and task alignment where you basically start with your goal and then you write up everything that you need to get to that goal, and you have deadlines and timelines based on that, and then you push everything
Mhm.
back. And I mean, I'm very strict down to the task, the manager, the owner, and that way you ensure the delivery. And it's probably the most waterfall, anti Silicon Valley kind of way to use tech. But if you look at some of the big tech companies, they often say they're doing stuff in different fashions and saying they're agile or Scrum, but they often just come down to waterfall. CEO said do something, they just do waterfall. So I don't like to dance around it. I like to say this is where it is. I mean, if it's worked for the rest of the world, it works. And I think agile methods, I'm getting off track here, but agile methodology is great in some respects, but it's led to a lot of useless features and a lot of things that don't really focus on product. And at the end of the day, I'm focused on one goal in mind, which has always been, how can I bring the most value to my customers? Now, not all customers will get value, and that's when you make something so mass adoptable where you're looking for intensive customers, especially in the education field. Like, not all customers are going to use it, be successful. I mean, 99% of startups fail, right? That was one of the biggest challenges I ran in running a global accelerator in a pandemic when everybody else was closed and companies were going out of business. I had heart issues and ended up in the hospital several years ago because when
Mhm.
COVID happened, I worked 24 hours a day trying to save as many of my companies as possible. I was on the phone.
Mhm.
I mean, and when we started, it was like $300 for like 3 months of service. Like, I didn't care about making money. I just wanted to help as many people as possible. And so, like, for $300, save your company, or I'll do the layoffs for you, right? Like, it was so much, and I learned. I mean, significant amounts. I mean, I have people that still call me this day and they'll ask me for feedback, and I'm like, dude, you paid $300 to me like 7 years ago, and you're still calling. Like, you're gonna have to pay something now, because like I can't do this contract for you still. Like, it's not like that. And so that's my secret sauce, is that I just like to help people. It's my greatest strength and my weakness, because I've done well enough that I don't have to be like, I'm not the guy that likes to have a big mansion or any of these crazy things. I'm a simple guy. I eat peanut butter and jelly. I mean, the most like I like to do is get a massage or something, right, and eat some nice sushi. Outside of that, I'm really basic, and so I don't really go beyond that. I'm kind of autistic in
Mhm.
that sense. I think is that I wake up and I want to help people and do good work, and I've done that for as many years as I can remember. And that's my sauce. Is I think people, when they meet me and work with me directly, they see that I'm just genuine in that, and you know, and from there comes opportunities.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, and it kind of sounds like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, obviously, but it sounds like, because I was going to ask you, like, how do you stay true to that? But it sounds like, you don't. I guess you don't really have to work to stay true of who you are, and it sounds like you have that within who you are, and you've always had that within who you are. So you don't necessarily have to, I guess, work as much. You just have to kind of make sure and ask, like, what would Andrew do in this situation, and kind of stay true to that. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, and it's probably. I mean, if I was married, my wife would probably hate me, because I had someone get me up to it recently. They're like, "We'll give you $100,000 to run this thing and do this." Like, it was like a temporary project for 2 or 3 months, and I was like, it didn't require that much, but that's what everybody else was charging. I said, "Look, dude, like it doesn't cost that much to do it, and I don't even want to do that because it's not going to help you be successful. I will run it and teach your people how to do it after I've done it for 30 days, and I'll charge you like this much, and I'm going to put this much time into it." And that's exactly what you need, and that's where you're at. And if you don't want that, like, because you can't just outsource this, right? This is a major thing, and I don't want to put my name on it, because your company's not going to be successful if you just think you're going to outsource this. And so it's better for me to come in, show you how to do it for a tenth of the cost. And then they were very adamant. They're like, no, we want you to do this for the full amount. I'm like, I don't want the money. I don't need the money. Like, it doesn't really, like, that's not what I want to do. I don't want to work 60 hours a week on this project for 2 or 3 months, only for it to not be successful, not be what you want, because you didn't engage in the collaborative phase to make it successful. So, I only have to work a couple hours a week, right? So that's, I'm not going to do that. So yeah, it's really that
Yeah.
opportunity is that, it's nice, especially now that I live in Asia. It's so cheap out here. I mean, I don't miss the cost of America. God, my friends are spending like $200-300 a week on groceries, and I mean, you know, it's just not that way. So
Yeah, and I think that when you have it ends up being powerful to be able to not have that. I'm going to use the word attachment. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but sometimes that ends up being the fuel and the thing that we're working to achieve X and realize that X isn't even what we want. It's just kind of been, I guess, in I guess input into us to make us think that that's what we should want. But I think when you're able to do that introspection, and you're able to have that understanding of who you are, what kind of fuels you, then I think phenomenal things can kind of happen from there. So,
Yeah. Oh, and that pressure is, I think, one of the things that drives a lot of people. And especially when you think of it in the sense that, it's no matter how wealthy you get, unless you're just buying everything cash, you're still building more bills and building more pressure. And you're just,
right.
you're in a lot of my friends that live in the same state, like they've been successful, but they just live the same way instead of living humbly in it. Like they didn't Warren Buffett it and live in a small house, still eating regular food, right? And so now they just have to keep up with this. Otherwise, they lose it all. And
Yeah.
it's nice to be able to say you don't need all of that, and you can
Right.
walk away from anything at any point in time. I mean, that's anyone listening to this podcast can. Like nothing is holding you so far. I mean, you should stick to your family and responsibilities there.
Right.
But honestly, that $30,000 private school, I don't think it's necessary, right? Like I didn't ever know anyone that went to private school that was more successful than anyone that went through public school, unless they had connections, right? And it's just
Right.
there's so many ways to live if you open your mind to it, and just it's not about the Joneses. It's not about the green grass next door. It's about what you're happy with, and like
Mm.
that house isn't going to make you happy. That giant jet isn't going to make you happy. It's being happy with yourself first. And I'm not saying I'm not anti-rich, right? I mean, I have tons of friends that are very wealthy that are happy. It's just that you need to be happy first before And I think the way to do that is to choose how you live your life, choose what you're committed
Mm.
to, and be happy with the work you do. And if you do that, then you can be okay with everything else, because I have friends that are millionaires that scammed people in crypto. And I really don't like to associate with them in that way, because, I think of all the grandmas and people that lost money in those schemes. I think of all the people that just lost, like, that regard, versus people that knowingly went in. I mean, there's accidents where you accidentally make money, right? But it's rare. Most people, I think, become extremely wealthy, and they make some decisions along the way that kind of burn someone. And I just don't morally like to live that way. I like to sleep well. So
Yeah, that makes so much sense, and I think it's something that everyone should heed and pay attention to as well too. Because I think again, you get caught in the race, and you're chasing sometimes the thing that you don't even know why you're chasing it, but you
yeah,
just start to become consumed by it. So I wanted to switch gears a little bit, and I
go
wanted
ahead.
to ask you for what I call a CEO hack. So this could be like an app, a book, or even a habit that you have. But what's something that makes you more effective and efficient?
Not listening to all the hacks and I love Huberman and that, but not sticking to those things. They'll tell you to wake up at 6 a.m. and do that. And oh, you know what? I hate Tim Ferriss, and he doesn't. And 4 day work. Not listening to any of that, right? And
Yeah.
Tim, I tell you, I sent him my app when I first launched it, and he was like, "Oh man, I really like this," and he left me a bad review. And it really put my mind of, well, if you want advice and you want feedback, look people who've done what you've done, are successful in what you've been there, and then you ask them for advice. And so this is a real hack, which is I only listen to people and accept advice from people who have done what I've done or been where I want to be and know what they're talking about. Anyone else, they can screw off. I don't care. I don't ask.
Mhm.
I'm not going to ask my 7-Eleven guy for stock
Mhm.
advice. So I'm not going to ask someone that's never done something or never been through a scenario. I do it, and that sounds like common sense, but I've been coaching CEOs for almost a decade now, and I've been coaching CEOs for almost. Has this person they went to for advice done this? They don't think of that. They don't think to ask, "Hey, have you ever dealt with this?" It's like a weird therapy kind of an influence where the world has influenced us to talk like therapy, like everyone's our therapist. But I've been coaching CEOs for almost.
Mm.
Talking about money is just weird or something, I guess. But I mean, everywhere else in the world, you interview everyone constantly. I mean, if you're going on a date, you get interviewed. You go to China and you go on a date, you're going to interview you about everything in your life, what you're passionate about, what you're doing, your work. So I think it's important to interview people you look for advice from, and and see, okay, maybe this person was successful 10 years ago and now they're making money selling books. Okay, maybe that 4-day work week isn't real, right? Because, unless you're planning to also be someone who just sells books. So,
Yeah, that makes so much sense, and it's like success leaves clues, but you want to make sure that those clues are actually there. And I love that word interview and actually having and doing due diligence and understanding exactly like is this person who they say they are? Because I think especially you see that coaches, courses, consultants, a lot of those things are very prevalent for people that may not have those clues that are behind them. So to be able to ask those questions, to do those interviews, is absolutely huge. But let me ask you this: for people that might want to ask those questions, how do they know what questions to ask?
that's a great question. That's what I use ChatGPT for. I
There
would,
you go.
I'm not even kidding. I'd say, this is the problem I'm dealing with. What kind of questions should I ask about this? And it'll just prompt it out for you, right? Like,
Mm,
really, that's an amazing benefit of it, right? Is like, if I don't know the right question to ask ChatGPT, I will tell it what I'm trying to get to and ask it to rephrase the question for me so that I will get a better response, right?
mm,
Like, and that's, you can use that in human scenarios too. Hey, Gresh, I want to be on 10 more podcasts, but I don't know what to do. What question should I ask, or what should I look to see and what I'm looking for in a podcast, right? And maybe and the real thing is, I'm not actually trying to be on 10 more podcasts. It's actually, what do I want from it, right? And so it's, what are you
mm,
trying to get to? And oftentimes it's like, if you go to a random person, they don't know what you're trying to get to either, right? And so, asking the right, it's not always possible, but I think introspection. I think the U.S. culture is all about immediacy and picking up your phone and just texting someone. Trying to not be a texter. When people work for me, I kind of I've gotten to this point now where I don't allow text messaging almost unless it's an emergency. I make them send everything in an email. And even when I was running my last company, I made everything in a memo format. I had a special format that I got from Jeff Bezos and Amazon that we had to
mm.
follow for everything, because otherwise people don't think, they just want to run stuff through. And some people didn't like my process, but many people did. And some people don't like it because they feel like it didn't give them control. And I'd be like, you have full control. You have 10 pages, 6 pages, whatever the link, to put your entire vision. But you have to run through all these things first. You have to figure out what the cost is, what the ROI, the problems. You have to talk to people. Like, you really have to form it together before it's worth my time. And I think that if people can, it's like that, if you're mad at someone, write a letter to them and then give it 24 hours. It's the same thing. As soon as you have an idea about something, or you have a problem, it doesn't have to be solved immediately. Don't just run to the first person to vent, right? I mean, you can go to someone and say, hey, I want to vent, but don't take that as I'm seeking solutions, right? I think
Mm,
that's actually been one of the big game changers of my entire life for relationships. Is I say, hey, I just need to vent. I don't need solutions. So can you just take my
right,
venting? And people can tell you no. They can say, hey, I have too much shit on my plate right now. I can't take your shit too.
right.
But also, you separate, like, I don't want to vent. I want solutions. And when you tell someone that, then they're going to help you understand yourself. And it's really about not just throwing your shit on people, but putting your stuff on the table and then repackaging it together. And then it doesn't mean you can't take that package and go to someone else too and seek it from multiple people. So,
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And then just having that intention and that intentionality and also doing the work. And there's a quote where if I had more time, I would have wrote a shorter letter. And a lot of times by actually doing that due diligence, sometimes even in the stuff that we're asking or requesting or we're going out to people, it ends up allowing us to be a lot more intentional, so that we can be specific about the thing that we're asking. So I think going through those exercises is so important, and having that standardization helps out because it helps people to be on the same wavelength, they go through the same kind of standard, and all those things at the end of the day help you get closer to where and what your goal might be.
yeah, and if you don't have a person in your life or access to talk to the CEO of Walmart, ChatGPT is a very good place to do it right now. Like, you can actually say, I want you to be this person, this expert in this, and I'm going to come to you with this problem, and I want you to be able to challenge me, think critically, and have this full conversation. And you can tell it to be that, and it'll do it. I mean, this is how I have added so much intentionality to my life. And honestly, it's right a lot of the time. When it first came out, it wasn't always right. Sometimes it hallucinated. But I've gotten to a point now where, I mean, I've had some even legal, like, anything that I want to know, it just pumps stuff out, and then I pull references, and then I check it with, like, Perplexity, and it's really improved my life. I mean, I don't send things out anymore without that, because I'm an impulsive person. I have high energy, right? And the only thing that
Mm,
can keep up with me is AI. And, it's one of those things like, and a lot of CEOs, they want to move fast, right? Well, you don't need a
Right.
PR team anymore. You can literally program one up and it'll use all the best knowledge and it'll give you like 80% there, right? And that's going to
Right.
cut a lot of your cost down. So that's just the way it is.
Yeah, absolutely. You get to have a lot more impact. Would you consider that to be what I would like to call a CEO nugget? It's a little bit more word of wisdom or piece of advice. I like to say it might be something you would tell your favorite client, might be one of the CEOs you're talking with, or if you were to hop into a time machine, you might tell your younger business self.
It could be, but I think the number one thing I'd say to myself right now is for a long time I stopped on the self promotion side and I stopped really. I was just focusing on my clients and all my business, and I
Mhm.
just stopped going on the public side and never stopped promotion, never stopped working on brand because promotion side, and I stopped.
Mhm.
I think
Right.
it's really important to always be building the brand and setting that up.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, and I think that you always hear that around marketing, branding, and things like that. Is you always want to be getting out there, letting people know who you are, and obviously we have so many different ways that we can do that now. But as soon as you stop that, then you never know what might happen. You might have to make a pivot or something like that. And you won't want to have to reintroduce your brand because you have to work. I won't say twice as hard. I don't know what the number is, but you have to work probably harder than you would have worked had you already been out doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I turned down opportunities. I literally turned down my first million. I was on the show and I just missed it because I had another meeting come up one day. I didn't even think about
Mm,
it, right? Like, one of the biggest podcasts in the world. I was busy and I really, part of it was ego, but I want to say, because like maybe 20% ego. And then the other 80% was really, I just didn't care at the time. During COVID, I just thought there was bigger problems to deal with in podcasts. And never really liked listening to podcasts or reading other people's books. I mean, I really just had this, I went to mentors like that. And, in this last year, I've taken a lot of time to just really figure out what I wanted and connect with the authors and people that I wanted to, the quality of content. And there's so much quality content, but it's, there's 80% noise, right? And so if you find the quality content, I actually listen to podcasts now. And I never even listened to some of the ones I was on, right? And now I do. And now I put a lot of intentionality behind it because it's something that, I've always been an introvert and I never really thought about that.
mm. Yeah, absolutely. And that makes so much sense. But I think it also speaks to like we as organizations evolve, as the world evolves, we also evolve as well too. So sometimes it's well, not even sometimes, all the time. It's important to kind of take that temperature of who you are, what your why, where you are in those things, and I think it helps you to kind of go in alignment with that.
I agree.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So, I want to ask you now my absolute favorite question, which is the definition of what it means to be a CEO. And our goal is to have different quote unquote CEOs on the show. So, Andrew, what does being a CEO mean to you?
Chief everything officer. You got to be able to do everything at any point in time, and not the guy that just outsources everything. To me, it's you want to be the best of all worlds. Doesn't mean you have to do it all. But it's a big difference. You can't be the janitor all day, but you got to be willing to pick up. You got to know what your janitors do. You got to know where stuff is. You got to know where the cleaning room is. You got to be able to, like, in a crisis, fill a gap temporarily at any point in the company. I think a good CEO, if a CTO is sick, he can go in and manage for a couple of days. I think he can do the same thing in his product. He can manage his sales. I think a good CEO can handle any part of it, and it doesn't mean he's going to do it long term. But I think, and this is what I invest in: is a good CEO understands enough. He's connected to his business enough. He cares enough about it that he can do any of those things, but he trusts others to do it. And if anyone ever leaves, he has a good rapport, building connections there. He's never left with a big hole in his business.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I think that a lot of times when we think and use the word delegation in terms of like being a leader, CEO, entrepreneur, business owner, middle management, whatever the position might be, we think delegation is automatically you do the job, you worry about all the things, you know how to do everything. But I think as a leader, part of that responsibility is kind of having an awareness of around what's happening. And I think, like you said, if something happens to the person or there's a pivot, within the industry, whatever might happen, you want to make sure that you have responsibility for it. Maybe not necessarily doing it tactically on a day-to-day basis, but probably what needs to be done or what potentially may need to be done in the next year or 10 years or whatever that might be.
Yeah, I grew my business 300% year over year for 3 years. We, did what, 20 something million the year before last. Was on track to do like 40 million this last year. And so the only way you can do that and grow to like that, I mean, that's a big growth rate, is to to be able to know the size of your business. And I mean, the hack I had for that was I had reports every month. I mean, board level reports, and I had a tracking of data and systems, and that was so critical for me to do. I spent more time doing that so that I always had access to information and systems, because if anything happened, I mean, COVID and remote work made it much more difficult. I always knew I could just, even if I wasn't paying attention to something for a couple of weeks, I could go in and find a report and know where stuff was.
Yeah, and that's so huge to be able to kind of get that instant pulse around where things are, what pivots or changes you need to make. But I think even too, when you're trying to have that accelerated growth as well too, you probably were able to understand, okay, this is where that opportunity is based off those reports, rather than like we've been talking about having to go get the reports, have to figure out what the reports are going to be, KPI, all those things. If
No,
you already have
exactly.
them in place,
Right? You're seeing and tracking projects. I mean, it's just running the business, right? You're
yeah.
you're you're still being a CEO. Now, I mean, there are opportunities where as the company grows, where you can have a COO take on a lot more of that responsibility, and you can still own the highest level of responsibility of the ownership side of it, and you're not maybe making everyone teaching everyone how to do the reports, but it's all about the size of the business, right? If I was running a 5,000 person company, it'd be different than running a 200 person company. And
Mhm.
so that's just where it's at.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Well, awesome, Andrew. I truly appreciate that definition. Of course, I appreciate your time even more. So, what I wanted to do now is pass you the mic, so to speak, just to see if there's anything additional that you can let our readers and listeners know. And of course, how best people get a hold of you, find about all the awesome things you and team are working on.
Awesome. Andrew Ryan.io is a website. LinkedIn, hit me up on LinkedIn. You can message me for anything. I'm always down to help anyone, give advice on anything. It's one of my, like I said, my weakness. And yeah, I mean, I'm working on a book, but I don't plan on it releasing probably this year, probably end of next year. And yeah, I mean, hit me up. I love to meet new people. I'm most active on Twitter. You'll find me on Twitter. I wasn't on it for years, but now that Elon bought it, I'm super into it. And I would say this is another hack of the day. I got like 4 billionaires to comment and tweet, even Elon to comment on one of my tweets recently. Like, subscribe to who you want to follow and be in your network. And as soon as they post, track, post, build, and really only have notifications from that on Twitter. Don't worry about following 10,000 people. Focus on the network you want to build. Who are the 20 people that you want to connect and build rapport with? And you can do that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And to make it even easier, we'll have the links and information, of course, in the show notes so that you can get a hold of Andrew, find out about all the awesome things that he's doing. But truly appreciate you, my friend, for taking some time out and being on the show. I think one of the big things that really stuck with me is that a lot of times if we want to be something or we're striving to be something, we sometimes forget that we have different ways and a lot of different ways nowadays to make sure that we can be in that environment, whether that be podcasts, books, Twitter, whatever, X, whatever it might be. We have the opportunity to be able to be around those people that we ultimately want to be. If we set that intention, we set that goal, then we have to take the steps to make that happen. So thank you so much for reminding us of that, of course, for doing that as well too. And I hope you have a phenomenal rest of the day.
You too, brother. Thanks for having me.